how do we have to equip stratcomm policies in order to address these challenges? Do we need something?
So I think there needs to be a shift with stratcomm in reframing itself. Strategic communications principles for good communication are very well established, and I think they have made their point. I think when we're talking about the broader overarching stratcomm approach that does come from a defense world and national security world and needs to move into a pro-social space within governments, I think we're moving to a point of trying to frame it as narrative defense. We live in an interconnected communication space. It is getting ever more so. It is exploited by our hostile forces. We often do talk about it. It's also exploited by us in return. It's not a one-way street, that communication approach. But that does mean that we have to be a little bit more robust in our own domestic communications and be aware that a lot of the political debate doesn't often sit with that. It's interesting, the us and them challenge and the polarization challenge, in that I don't think we're ever going to be able to put those genies back in the bottle, and I don't think they're ever going to go away. We live in a world of nations. We live in a world of communities. It is, I think, an inherent part of human nature that we otherize people. One of the things that we've tried to do with liberal Western democracies is give space to others to tolerate and live alongside. And I think that is the bit that gets lost with polarization. That's the bit that gets lost with echo chambers and social bubbles. How do we then protect our narrative that creates space for that plurality to exist, for that confusion to exist, for that uncertainty to be there, but also reassure our populations of a trajectory that is not doom and gloom? And I think that's where we're sitting, in this sort of awkward space of there's been rapid technological change, there's rapid change in the global economic system, there's a lot of uncertainty. People feel like they don't know what's coming next. And that's new for people in Western democracies. We've not had that since the Second World War, really, other than the threat from the Cold War, which was much more existential and much more sudden and totally out of your hands. Now it's a case of, well, you know, my job's insecure, the mortgages are all over the place, will I ever be able to buy a house? You know, all these promises, all these ideals that we had about our society are being undermined. And that's a different sort of challenge that we're having to grapple with, especially with younger people who then are attracted to more certainties that come from other narratives that aren't real certainties. They're not real. And that's fine. We have to find ways of articulating and living and being in a much more chaotic and much more uncertain world. And that's where stratcomm is going to have to move into managing and holding the space for that uncertainty and that plurality.